hunting,
fishing,
cooking,
camping,
conservation,
travel,
gardening,
photography, family.
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 This is the Outdoor Rules Podcast.
It's always hard to start these things. Starting them is the hardest part of this.
We're starting like at the Big Bang and going from there out.
Yeah, well, Mark said yesterday he should have, when we said where do we want to start or something, he should have said, well, the cord was wrapped around my neck when I came out.
That is where you should have started.
He looks like E.T.
I don't think that would have been a
He
bad
did look
place.
like
No.
E.T.
He might have been the ugliest baby I ever saw.
He was something. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We are here today with a bunch of familiar voices, and we're gonna do an episode called Grant's Ruhl. Obviously, everybody knows by now that our last name is Ruhl, spelled R-U-H-L, but the other family name is the first name of Grant. There have been 5 Grants thus far, and I'm here today with 2 of them. Poppy, say hi.
Good afternoon or morning or whatever it is.
We don't know when people are listening to this.
Say hi.
Hi.
Better. And then we're here with the 4th Grant, which is Matt.
Hello,
So, Matt, your real name is what?
Grant.
Grant Matthew Ruhl.
Yeah, that's right. Grant Matthew.
So-
So the secret's out.
Somehow you ended up becoming Matt.
Yeah, don't Google me.
Well, now I want to Google you. I don't know that I'll find a lot. And then Mark's here too.
Hello.
Dad, we are Pennsylvania Dutch, right?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Well, we're actually Pennsylvania German, and our ancestry, most of it came from Germany.
Right. So Dutch is a mispronunciation of
Deutsch.
Deutsch.
Yes.
Right. And I think from what I understand, our ancestors came from like the German Swiss border region. I think that's where a lot of like the Anabaptist, Amish, Mennonite, Germans.
Austrian, Swiss, somewhere in that area, yes.
Right.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you know about the Ruhl's arrival here? Do you really know anything?
Very little.
And when I say here, I mean we're, as we've talked about before, we're in southeast or south central Pennsylvania. We're in Lebanon County, which is kind of in the heart of Amish country. Although our family is not Amish or Mennonite. Obviously, we're not Amish. I don't know. I wonder if probably not a lot of Amish podcasts out there. How far back do you know, like, anything about our family?
Well, I had some genealogy things that I could look at to go back, like who Grant's parents were and things like that. Tell here.
Well, when you say Grant, you mean the first Grant.
The first Grant.
So what do you know about?
Grant Killian Ruhl.
Right, which is kind of an interesting name.
Yes.
Because Killian is not very German.
Well, Killian was, I think, in his relation, of course, yes.
Well, so what history do you know about Grant Killian Ruhl?
Well, let's say not a whole lot. He got married to Amy Brubaker. They ended up having a bunch of kids, which would be my fathers and my uncles and aunts, 6 brothers, 3 sisters. Grant Killian had 2 sisters. One of them married several times and ended up living with him when he was living on the farm. And when I say about the farming, he started out with the family, and I think this was mentioned before in some of the podcasts. He farmed for the half, meaning like they had about 100-acre farm that they raised all kinds of things on. They had, I know, some orchards and some different things like that, but they did everything in the half. Basically, they picked 2 bushels of apples. One of them went to the owner.
They were essentially sharecroppers.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that they ever used that terminology here, but my father, the second Grant, always said, yeah, they farmed for the half. So, and they did that up until my grandfather, or the first Grant's uncle, which was a Kreider. He sold a little 12-acre farm that my grandfather eventually lived on for $1. So he lived on that farm, of course, is still in the family. One of my uncles got it, and then after that, my cousin got it. Well, that was my Uncle Guy got it, and then after that, my cousin Jeff, who still lives there, has it.
But that 12 acres is essentially the only piece of land that the Ruhls ever owned outright. Right.
As far as I know, that generation, let's say.
Right.
So until the uncles, or until my uncles or the Grant's children, started buying or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the only family farm.
Right.
And we've talked before about the history of this area that we're in here. There's a big open pit iron mine that operated up until the 70s, operated from, in some form, almost from before America was a country in the 1700s, and operated continuously into the 1970s until it flooded. I mean, the mine was becoming played out at that point.
Pretty much when Agnes came through in 72.
Right. So we talked a little bit, I think, in the 3 Mile Island episode about Hurricane Agnes and what it did. But one of the things it did here was it literally filled the open pit with water.
Right.
The pumps couldn't keep up and it flooded.
And all the equipment that was down there got flooded.
Right.
Else, so.
And the farm, not the little piece that we owned, but the farm where your dad was raised, so where Grant Killian was, your great-grandfather was farming, that farm was outside of Rexmont, Pennsylvania, or almost in Rexmont, Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
And Rexmont was essentially a community just kind of around the mountain or around the hill from the iron mine.
Yes.
I mean, it was a mining community.
There were a lot of the mine was run by Bethlehem Steel, and there were a lot of Bethlehem Steel employees that lived there and the other small communities around the open pit mine that were originally even built for the workers that worked there.
Right. Yeah, they were mine towns.
Right.
Like Bird Coleman,
right.
Miners Village.
Right.
Kind of on the nose with the name of Miners Village.
Right. Toy Town.
And they were true mine towns, too. I mean, the mining company owned the general store. It was what you think of when you think of, like, the company store. They talked about that a lot, I remember.
Yeah, they were company towns.
Right.
Right. And that kind of plays into some of the stuff I want to ask about later. But just to say that while that generation, your great-grandpa, didn't work at the mine, they farmed, we were closely connected to that community as a family, even at that time.
Yeah. I mean, Grant's children, the uncles particularly worked at the mines. So,
we'll get into, I just mean, but even though we, like, your great grandpa was a farmer, we were, as a family, kind of embedded in that mining community.
Right.
Yeah. And it kind of comes up later. So I guess there's a couple of, like, family stories around this that I want to get into, but I guess talk about your dad's generation. So your dad was the second Grant.
Yes.
And he didn't have a middle name, right?
He did not have a middle name. He was Grant Ruhl Jr., which was kind of unusual.
Now, his brothers called him Junior.
Yeah, a lot of times, yes.
And he was the third in line of the brothers. He wasn't the first born.
No.
Right. So your great-grandparents had 10 children.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Just go through that real quick.
Well, I get confused who's the oldest, but I think
Cyrus.
Edna. Well, Cyrus
was the oldest and passed away as a kid.
Okay, we'll go with what Grant the fourth is saying. So Cyrus was the oldest. But then I think it was the girls, Edna, who ended up being Edna Hammer, Verna, who ended up marrying Alton Snyder. Interesting fact about Verna, she actually worked for Mrs. Buckingham. Buckinghams were really important in the original mining community. And Mrs. Buckingham had a house that was across street, well, I say the street, you could look across a park and see the White House from her house in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it was those Buckinghams.
It was those Buckinghams, yes.
Right.
She actually worked there for Mrs. Buckingham.
She worked in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, when Mrs. Buckingham would leave from from Cornwall and go down there for, I think, the winter, there were times when Verna went down and worked with her down there.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Then the other sister, Sarah, was married to Robert Gushert, who was also a person that worked at the mines. And then there were the 6 brothers. The oldest brother was Wilmer. He worked at the mines. It ended up, he did a lot of work above ground. He was in charge of a lot of the above ground work that happened at the mines, in charge of the carpenter shops and mechanic shops and all the things.
He was like the chief of above ground maintenance or something.
Yes.
I thought I've heard him described that.
Yeah. And then my Uncle Guy was the second oldest. He actually worked some there, but he ended up working more at the end for a Metropolitan Edison company. He was on a line truck. And then my father, who did not work at all at the mines. And then there's Uncle Al, was the 4th oldest, or the 4th in line. He did work at the mines also. And then my Uncle Sim, who actually in his young days worked at the mines a little bit, but then he ended up going to Indiana Tech for engineering and became an engineer and a salesman for Joy Manufacturing, which made coal mining equipment. And for most of his years, he sold big pieces of coal equipment. I'm talking about $10 million pieces of equipment. And then my Uncle Dick was the youngest, and he also worked at the mines. Now, when I say the mines and the early parts, they worked at Cornwall, but Bethlehem Steel decided to open up a mine in Morgantown. And when they did that, it was Grace Mines. My Uncle Wilmer, my Uncle Al, and my Uncle Dick moved along with that to Morgantown.
Cornwall was the iron mine here close to where we live.
Right.
And Grace Mines in Morgantown was also an iron mine?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so
before we go too far, I want to go back to my grandpa and what I remember about him. This is Grant Killian Ruhl. I mean, I have a lot of pictures, not a lot of pictures, but a couple pictures. The year that I was 1, they were on the farm in Rexmont. And I think that was for Christmas. That following February is when they moved from Rexmont, when my grandfather moved from Rexmont to the small farm that we talked about. And when I remember him as a child going to the small farm, we would go there routinely, probably once a week. He would always chase me with his cane, do different stuff like that. And that I remember stories my father told about him. They weren't always the best. By that, I mean, my father talked one time about working for a couple weeks picking tomatoes. He was so proud that he got $10 for picking these tomatoes. And when he got home, Grandpa took it.
Yeah.
So anytime, and I have heard my other uncles talk about the same thing. You know, he would farm them out to other farmers and do things like that. But if they got any compensation for it,
it was the families.
It was a family's compensation.
Right.
And eventually we'd probably get into some hunting. I never had the opportunity to hunt with my grandfather. He was done doing that by the time I was old enough to hunt or that kind of thing. But I remember my father talking about when he started his hunting, one of the things that they were allowed to do and what they talked, I don't remember him talking about my grandfather deer hunting, but small game hunting and pheasants. When I started hunting, pheasants and small game around a little farm was amazing compared to what it is today. But my father talked about when he started hunting, what they were allowed to do is they would carry a .22 and they would hunt and hope that they would see a rabbit sitting. And then it was, you see the eye, shoot for that eye with a .22. So that's how I think all of the brothers started hunting.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned pheasants. I mean, this, and I think we maybe mentioned it a long time back on a podcast, but this area used to have pheasants like South Dakota has pheasants.
Yes.
And now there is basically not a wild pheasant left in Lebanon County.
Yeah. I mean, when I started hunting, I didn't
argue Pennsylvania.
I did not realize how good a pheasant hunting that we had. And there were pheasants around all year long. They were breeding here.
Yeah.
You had pheasants nests in the summer in the fields, you know, and you'd see the hens running with a whole bunch of chicks and things like that all year long. And
Right. And so the small game hunting that your great grandpa did and that your dad and they did in those days, I mean, a lot of it was about food. Like it was an available source of food. They could easily go kill a bunch of pheasants and a bunch of rabbits.
yeah.
I also heard Pop Grant talk a lot about there were no deer back in those days. You rarely saw a deer.
Well, right.
They didn't deer hunt because I don't think there were very many deer to hunt.
I think it was maybe tougher times yet. You're talking about people that were coming out of the Depression.
Right.
And, they would shoot. It was important to shoot a doe for meat or shoot a deer for meat.
Yeah, I think they
So-
essentially shot most of the population off in this area.
So, well, there were always some deer around, but
I mean, there
Yeah,
were
not like there are deer now.
Not like there are now.
I distinctly remember Pop Grant telling a story about how one time there was a buck running through the pasture, and that was like a rarity. Like they never saw deer on the farm.
right.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember there was one time, the first day of small game season, they were really upset because they did see a deer. Someone shot a 6-pointer in the middle of the cornfield with a shotgun, but that was a rarity. You're right. There weren't a lot of.
Yeah, I think
deer at that
I
time.
think that the reason that you didn't hear very many deer hunting stories from them in that time and era was because there weren't deer to hunt.
One of my uncles, Wilmer, had a cabin close to Mount Gretna, and that's where we would go when we would hunt here. And he had a friend, a doctor that had a lot of land there, and we hunted that land. And actually now it has all been built up with houses and things like that. And I think there's more deer there now than there were back then.
Yeah. Well, probably not too surprising. Whitetails
Right.
are pretty well adapted to people.
Right.
But I mean, for whatever the reason is, one of the changes around here for sure has been that there are no pheasants, not that many rabbits really anymore, which they also killed a lot of rabbits
Right.
and ate a lot of rabbits. And there are a lot more deer.
Yeah.
So, to get back to the family and, I think you mentioned, so of the 6 brothers and 3 sisters, let's see, Sarah's husband worked at the mine,
Yes.
right? Wilmer, Dick,
Al.
Sim worked in mining.
Tim worked in the mine until he went to college. So for a couple of years, he worked at the mine.
Yeah. But so, I mean, a lot of folks, a lot of the brothers, a lot of the siblings ended up connected to the mine in one way directly in one way or another. How was it that Pop Grant didn't end up working at the mine? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I mean, he met my mother at the Mount Gretna roller rink and ended up working, I know, for a bus company and ended up then working at Bamberger's, which he worked for 45 years.
And Bamberger's was a garage. He was an auto mechanic.
And I do know that when the uncles moved to Morgantown, and I'd be pressed a little bit to tell you exactly when that was. It
must have been right after Agnes.
No, it was before that. They were there already.
Oh, okay.
So it was in the 60s sometime, I think, maybe even 50s. They were after my father to go along down there, and I don't know why he never did, because it would have been a much better job with Bethlehem Steel at that time than what he was doing, working as a mechanic. But he just never went for some reason or other.
So he ends up meeting your mom, and they get married. He was born, I guess we should have talked about that.
24.
He was born in 24. You were born in
51.
And Matt?
78.
And then when was Grant the 5th born?
2000.
So there you go. So he marries your mom, and they move into the city of Lebanon.
Yeah, well, he came from a big family which didn't have that, they were moving to the farm just after that, so there was really nowhere else for him to live. So I think it was probably easiest just to move in with my mother's family because they had some room.
I see. He moved in with your mother's family in Lebanon.
Yes.
And was that the house you grew up in, or was that somewhere else in Lebanon?
That was the house I grew up in.
No, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, that was my mother grew up in that house.
And then Grant Killian, his dad, stayed on the small farm for a while, right?
Yes.
Now, when he was there, were any of the boys still with him?
My Uncle Guy.
Guy lived there.
The one that worked at MedEd, yes.
But I guess there was a family story I wanted to get to about that. I remember a story about Sim, right? Wasn't so Sim, whose full name is Simon, wasn't he the last? I thought he was the last one living on the farm with your grandpa when they had horses.
I don't remember that. It would have typically been Sim or Dick.
Yeah, because they were the youngest. But I thought it was Sim the story was, maybe I just made this up. There's got to be a grain of truth in it. But
let me guess. If it was Dick told my grandfather that if he doesn't get rid of the horses and switch over to a tractor, he's moving out.
Yeah.
And I think that.
Well, right. Then the whole story was kind of like, and that was, I always thought it was Sim, but it was Dick.
Well, it might have been both of them, but Dick's the one I've heard.
Okay. And I guess what I remember the story being is Dick said he figured out how much it was costing your great grandpa to keep the horses. They had already gotten, I guess I understood it as they had already gotten their first tractor or recently gotten the first tractor, but he kept the team because they grew up farming with horses most of the time.
Yes.
And then they got the first tractor, but your grandpa wouldn't get rid of this team of horses. And Dick figured out how much money it was costing great grandpa to keep those horses, even though they didn't need them anymore. And it was more than he was making working on the farm. And he went to your great grandpa and said, either those horses go or I go. And great grandpa said to him, where are you going to go?
Yeah, pretty much.
And that was it.
Yeah.
He kept the horses and
I think Dick left.
Yeah, right.
There's a stubbornness in the Grant rules. We shouldn't get into that.
Well, there's a stubbornness in all the rules, I think. I don't think it's limited to the Grants from what I can tell. Certainly seems to have been passed on to my children.
Youngest.
Yeah, right. Well, I've met your younger son, too. So anyway, Pop Grant ends up living in the city of Lebanon and working as an auto mechanic. He worked as an auto mechanic his whole life. And I think we talked a little bit at some point in a podcast about this, and we've mentioned it here. But, I mean, the small game hunting, particularly pheasant hunting, from a hunting standpoint, that was what he really loved to do.
Yes.
He didn't, I mean, like, I remember him deer hunting, and I maybe remember him shooting one deer.
I think he shot one doe with that 4570 that we were at camp.
He bought a trapdoor Springfield 4570 at some point, and he really wanted to kill a doe with it. And I think he maybe got one.
I think he got one. That's the only deer I ever remember him shooting.
But like, how many bucks do you remember? Like, how many deer do you remember? Was there a period where he was like deer hunting a lot and successful at it, or was it something that he did but was never really that into?
When it came to deer hunting, what I remember most is, I go back. He would, of course, go to camp and hunt up there, hunt the big woods. But what he would do is he would start in the morning behind camp. There were a couple fields there, and my other Uncle Guy every morning would get up and drive to the top. There was a pipeline that followed the whole way from camp, would go for miles. He would go a couple miles in that pipeline. And my father would start a camp in the morning, and about mid-afternoon, if not at lunch, he would be back there. So basically what he would do is just walk. He enjoyed walking. He was not much at sitting at a spot for deer hunting. And if you do a lot of deer hunting, even in the mountains, you know that you're not going to sneak up on too many deer, So what I'm saying is I don't think he was as good or cared as much about deer hunting as he did about small game hunting. I remember starting with them. It was with my Uncle Wilmer at the land that's close to us. And I remember the very first time I ever went, he ended up finishing one. So, okay, my very first hunting experience. So my uncle and my father, they take me in through and they say, okay, you stand here, someplace I've never been before. So, and I'm standing there in the Woolrich, and I have a 35 Remington. Boy, this was my grandfather's gun also, the same guy that had you wearing his Woolrich. So
this is the 35 Remington that we talked about on the Rifles podcast
Yeah.
that none of us could hit anything with.
So I'm standing there. You know, your first time you're there, you don't know where you are. I'm standing there, and like 10 minutes, okay, 15 minutes, starting to think, man, where is everybody? I'm standing, I don't know where I'm at. You know, it goes on for like about 20 minutes. I don't remember exactly how long it was, maybe 25 minutes. All of a sudden, bang, bang, and it's not too far away. Boy, I'm all charged up now. I get the gun ready and everything. And then I'm standing there another 10 minutes, nothing. I think it actually was 3 shots. I'm standing there. I don't know how long it was, but it seemed like forever. Finally, somebody comes. Then my dad comes. He said, come on, come with me. We ended up getting out onto this old railroad bed. And he said, now you stand here and I'm going to go a little further down. Well, what they were doing is they had crippled a deer. And I think my cousin and my uncle were going to try to push it down. They wanted to push it to me, the 12-year-old. And my father was a little further down the tracks. So they're coming down. I don't see anything. Next, my father shoots. Well, it ended up he shot the buck. So that was my first experience. The only other thing I got to add about that is we went down then. Of course, you had the buck laying there. I think, wow, this is really great. You know, my father shot one. First time I ever hunted, you know what I mean? Shot a deer. And I found out about gut shots. The deer had been eating acorns. And when they opened that up, I think that's the thing to this day. I don't like gutting deer.
Yeah.
I got as far away from that as I could because that really reeked.
Yeah.
And anyhow, that was so. Yeah, I remember my father shooting that buck. I remember him shooting a couple other ones. Never anything big like we talked about it upstate. Most of them upstate were small deer, but he wasn't a big deer hunter. I do remember one time we used to go back to an area near Pine Grove and climb up on top of the mountains, and he shot at a big buck. And it ran about 100 yards, and another guy shot at it. As somebody that we knew, and I didn't have a lot of confidence. My father was a good shot with a rifle, though. It wasn't that he couldn't shoot a rifle. The deer fell over dead, and they both shot from the same side. Both were shooting 30-06. It didn't go all the way through the deer, and it ended up the other guy shot last, so he ended up with the deer, and I really believe my father probably shot it first. Because when the other guy shot it, fell over right away, which was kind of odd. So
right
after it had been running a while, you know, it was all charged up. It wouldn't have died that quick. So
right. We were all talking, I don't know when it was, recently about the fact that I think on the rifle episode, we all told our first deer story.
Yes.
Right. And I don't know that we know yours.
Well, my first deer story was when I was, other than that story. And
yeah, but I mean, the first one you got.
The first deer I shot is one hanging on the wall downstairs.
Really?
When I was
We wondered
17.
that.
Yes. The 17 was a big year for me. A lot of things happened. Something that I heard you say earlier, my father never bow hunted. That's not true. I was bow hunting at 17. That's when
we never said you never bow hunted.
Yeah, I remember.
I know you bow hunted.
Well, I bow hunted, but anyhow.
Bow hunt much. You said you didn't bow hunt when we
were kids.
Yeah, I did not anymore. So anyhow, that year is the year the deer stand broke underneath us.
So we're going to tell that story in the upcoming episode.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
Let's save the broken tree stand.
And that's the first year I ever shot a goose. You know, I did goose and hunt. First year I ever shot a wild turkey.
Wow.
But that is also, I was hunting it. That's pretty much very, very close to where we were just talking about, where they dropped me off when I was my first deer. And they had a couple little dams that they had built on there. This doctor that owned it built these dams, and he stocked some beaver in there. They also stocked rabbits in this area for beagle clubs and stuff to use. But anyhow, not as many people could hunt in it. So I was hunting. It was a day, probably, I did the least amount of hunting that day for deer in any year, any time up and since I started hunting when I was 12 on a Saturday, because I would only hunt on a Saturday. That's it, you know.
Deer season started on Monday, but you had to go to school.
I had to go to school. My father wouldn't take me out of school to hunt or anything like that. So Saturday was the only time. That morning it really rained, and we didn't go out till like noon. And it was like mid-afternoon, and I was hunting and walking and looking at one of these dams. Now everything was really quiet to walk then because it had rained that morning. And I saw the deer across the dam and shot, and he went right down. And then I went over, and he wasn't dead yet. I tried to shoot him in the neck and missed him.
Is that with a 35?
That was with the 35, yeah.
That makes sense.
So,
Yeah. So
I did
First
get
shot
him.
must have been real lucky.
I did get him in the second shot, though, in the neck. I didn't want to ruin the meat, so I didn't want to shoot too low. So. But anyhow, then the second one.
or you didn't want to see the acorns.
Yeah, I didn't want to see the acorn. So then I started yelling for my dad because I knew it was somewhere close by, and 2 other people showed up before he did.
Oh, yeah.
So I was worried these guys are going to try to take this buck because it was the biggest thing I had seen just about ever, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
The
I
only
think we mentioned it. It's a 115-inch 8-pointer or something, probably.
Yeah.
115, 120,
Right.
but.
Yeah, but for that time period, that was a big deer.
that was a monster.
Well,
the
and
story that was
It's a nice deer now.
And you're right. And I mean, not just for that time period. I mean, I grew up looking at that deer thinking, man, that is a big one. I would love to kill a buck that big someday. You know, it's just that is one of those things. Like you talk about how much the pheasant hunting has changed and how that's gotten worse. But the deer hunting has just gotten so much better that now, how many bucks? So you kill that buck at 17, right?
Yeah, yes.
And I would say that, like, I then remember you killing a big buck, you know, when I was like, I don't know, 14 or something.
It'd be 40 just about, right?
Well, it
Yeah.
would have been older than that. I mean, that would have been in 94. So you would have been like in your mid 40s, probably.
You shot another deer that big.
Till you shot another deer that big.
Yeah,
But
probably. I don't know.
But then in that, like, I mean, since then anyway, how many bucks have you killed nicer than that?
3 or 4 for sure.
4 or 5, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, and just the point is, I mean, it's a nice deer, and I don't mean to take away from it. I would very gladly go out this afternoon and shoot that buck. But my point just being that, like you're saying, at the time, that was something people probably came and looked at it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the story I had heard after that there was this deer supposedly lived in an area that people weren't allowed to hunt. And someone that day had run through that area and run the deer out of that area. And so it was out wandering around where it wouldn't have normally been wandering around. So
How many, because we talked about it on the rifles episode, how many deer do you think you got with that 35 Remington?
well, I shot that one. I remember shooting 2 out of trees. We used to hunt out of tree, no tree stand. We'd find a tree to climb up. I shot 1 out of a drive one time. I think the first 1 or maybe 2 that I shot, I had a series when we were hunting what we called Wilmer's Hollow. That same Wilmer, that my oldest uncle. I shot the first 1 or 2. I shot 4 in a row out of that hollow. And I think the first 2 were with that 35 Remington.
So half a dozen or more.
Yeah.
Well, none of us ever got one with it. And I told the story, I missed 2 in that one drive going into the deer exclusion area.
Jumping over the fence.
Yeah. But I also had that gun. I forgot about this until later. I had that gun one time in doe season, and it was cold.
You were so angry.
And it wouldn't go off. Yeah, I couldn't get the stupid thing to fire.
I never ever had that problem. So,
Yeah, well, I did.
yeah.
Anyway, so the other thing that came kind of to us as a family, I mean, a little bit unique to our side of the family, was that and we talk about this a little bit in the 3 Mile Island episode, is that Pop Grant took up fishing.
Yes.
Which was kind of unique to him. Like none of his brothers became fishermen in the way that he did.
No.
And where did you say that came from?
I think Grandpa Gettle, like my mom's.
You think it
father.
came from your mom's, like your dad started fishing with his father-in-law?
Yeah, I know that he did that, yes.
Do you think that's after he moved in with them?
I think maybe. I don't know that for sure, but I think maybe. I mean, he had a few stories with him. My grandfather on that side came from poor people, you know what I mean? And they ate everything.
Right,
I mean,
they ate chubs and suckers.
If he went out and caught chubs, yes, he ate them. If they shot a groundhog, we had groundhog when I was little, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not too many times, but if you shoot a groundhog, we would eat the groundhog, you know? So, but yeah, he has a few stories with that grandfather. One of my favorite ones is he used to go down and fish overnight at the Chop Tank River in Maryland for hardheads, which are croakers, you know, and he said my grandpa Gale would go out on the bridge, you know, and fish, and he said he got tired, they weren't catching anything, so he went back and sat in the car for a while. And he went out after he'd been in the car for a while and looked down the bridge. Now, this was a real long bridge, maybe half a mile long. I'm not sure exactly how long. And he said he looked down through the bridge and there wasn't anybody standing on the bridge. But he could see his equipment there. He could see his tackle box and his rods leaning there, but he couldn't see him. But he really worried because he always had a little bottle he stuck in his tackle box. So he looked down the bridge. He said, "Oh, no, what's going on? What happened?" So he walks out through the bridge and he gets to where he was. And he said he's looking around and he looks at a light post and he said he could just see a set of hands holding onto the light post, leaning out over the water. He had to take a crap. So he knew he took this bottle. He said, "I didn't want to see anything. I was scared if I'd scare him, he'd let go and fall into the river." So
we should
I know he did some fishing with him for that. I don't know if that was a start or what.
We should do it seems like with all outdoor pursuits, because this is a commonality among all the people that I know that do outdoor stuff. There's always pooping stories. Yeah. I think maybe someday we should do a pooping stories episode. But anyway, I mean, and that, I think that is interesting, you know, that because Pop Grant taking up fishing and really becoming a fisherman, because he was really a fisherman. I mean, he loved to fish.
Yes, he loved to fish. I mean, the early days that I remember was more so trout.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember going to the river the first time to where we talk about Falmouth at the Conewago Falls or whatever you want to call them.
Right. And if you're listening and you're interested in that, we did a whole episode about 3 Mile Island and the fishing that our family did there and the nuclear power station and all of that. But
the thing that I remember about it, and I must have been before I was like 10 years old, because I remember he made me go to the Y when I was 11 to learn to swim, which was a really good thing, except I was playing Little League at that time and he was a coach. And if you went swimming, you weren't allowed to play that night. He wouldn't let me play Little League. You know.
He made you take swimming lessons and he wouldn't let you play baseball.
That sounds about right.
But anyhow, we went to Falmouth, and you guys are familiar with Falmouth, and you know how slippery the rocks are. And of course, I was 10, and I didn't know that, and got all wet. And I got on one of those long sliding rocks. It was kind of steep, and I couldn't swim. And I'm kind of sliding down off the edge of that into the water, and I got scared. And he just laughed at me. You know,
that sounds about right, too.
Yeah. You learn about the origins of all kinds of family trauma.
I'm fall in here and die, and he's laughing at me. But I got out of it okay, so I guess he was.
But he couldn't swim.
He couldn't swim either.
Right, he would go in boats.
Maybe that's why it wasn't saving me, right?
Well, right.
Yeah, he wasn't going in.
He couldn't do anything to save you. Yeah. But you learned to swim, and then you ended up getting into boats and all of that stuff. But he would go on boats to fish, but he was never really comfortable on boats because he couldn't swim.
No, we fished a lot of places because it wasn't off a boat. We fished more offshore, off land. that's why we went to Falmouth so much.
Well, we also wade fished a lot.
Wade fished a lot. When we go to Canada, we fished the Ottawa River where we didn't have to get into a boat. Now, we did fish at a lake when we went up there, things like that, but we did a lot of shore fishing.
He
At
loved
the beach.
He loved Indian River Inlet.
Indian
He
River
loved
Inlet.
fishing in Delaware Bay where it was nice and calm for the most part.
Well,
Surf fishing.
And Hatteras. That's why we got into going to Hatteras and fishing the surf there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you guys went all over the place up and down. I mean, from Canada to Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, and everywhere in between.
Right.
Doing all kinds of different things, from pike to bluefish and stripers and everything else. There was a story I didn't want to forget to tell that I love about Pop Grant and his brothers. And again, maybe this is one of those myths that I've got in my head because I mentioned this to Matt or Mark the other day, but I'm curious to see if you remember the story. But I remember the story because, you know, they grew up, like you said, Pop Grant was born in 24, so they were very much children of the Depression. He was the middle brother.
Right. And
anything of value they took advantage of. I mean, so, you know, they're hunting small game for food. I mean, they enjoyed it, but they're doing it for food. It was very much about food. But anyway, they were out and they saw a raccoon up in a tree, which the hide of the fur from a raccoon was worth something then. And they shot the raccoon and it died in the crotch of a tree. You remember this story?
I remember the story, yeah.
I'll tell it, and then as I remember it, and then you correct me. So they couldn't figure out how to get the raccoon down, and Pop Grant, while he was the middle brother, he was small for his age, particularly when he was young. Right? Didn't he grow like 6 inches after he graduated high school or something?
He was the shortest in his graduating class. And
he was only like 5'6" or 5'7" as an adult, right? He wasn't tall.
No.
And he grew a lot after he graduated.
Maybe a little taller than that, but yeah, he grew a lot after he graduated.
So anyway, he was relatively old for his size. So they couldn't figure out how to get the raccoon out of the tree. And what they finally landed on was somebody went back to the farm and got a rope. And they knew that it would be easy to climb, or maybe not easy, but they knew it would be possible to climb up the tree.
Well, let me add this thing. Mark maybe can associate that. He was the youngest brother at the time. You know, he was dealing with these two older brothers.
So he was the youngest of the ones out there.
Yeah,
right. So they tie the rope around his chest.
Yes.
And they send him up the tree.
Yes.
He climbs the tree with a rope around his chest, gets to the raccoon, throws the raccoon out of the tree, and now the plan is for him to go himself over the Y of the tree, so the rope's through the Y of the tree, and they're going to let him down on the rope.
Yeah, yes. I don't know exactly how they had it all hooked up. But
and the flaw in the plan is, say he's 20 feet up in the tree, the rope's only 30 feet long.
Yeah. And
so they start letting him down, and when he's 10 feet or more off the ground, they run out of rope.
Yeah.
And now he's dangling there.
Not only that, he's sucking for air.
Right. The rope is tightened around his chest. And they finally just land on the solution to this is to let him go.
Well, they would do that. I think they do. Your brothers would do that to you, Mark?
Yeah. Mark, as the youngest, how long do you think it would have taken Matt and I to come to the conclusion that we should just let the rope go?
3-4 seconds.
I kind of feel like once he got the raccoon, we might have just left.
Absolutely on the table.
Yeah, it's a very Brothers Rule kind of story. But they got the raccoon, and Pop Grant survived the experience, so I suppose all's well that ends well.
Maybe that's why he was so good at teaching you lessons the hard way.
Yeah, well, he did often say, and I often repeat, our most valuable lessons are learned from our costliest mistakes. And maybe that's one of those things about planning and thinking through things before you do them is you probably ought to check to make sure that you not only have enough rope to get up the tree, but down the other side.
There's a good point to that. You ever hear my raccoon story?
No.
We know when I first got married, Karen and I moved onto the farm with a guy that had coon dogs. And we would go out with him. And at night, well, not Karen, I would go out with him. And he'd usually, when we go out, he'd shoot the first raccoon. So they'd come down for the dogs. And then after that, we'd tree him. He wouldn't shoot anymore. But he shot one time, was up in the tree and couldn't get it, and I volunteered to climb up the tree to see if I could get the raccoon out of the tree. And I had a pistol, and when I got up there, the raccoon was alive.
Oh,
Not happy to see you?
He's up above me. So I shoot one up at him, and he starts making this god-awful howl and started shaking around. I thought, holy shit, he's going to fall in my head. I was so scared. I got down out of that tree. I don't remember how we got the raccoon down, if we kept shooting it or whatever.
So maybe climbing up trees to get raccoons. Is
Yeah. Well, I said about shooting deer out of trees. So, yeah, I used to like to climb trees and stuff like that.
Right.
That wasn't one of my smarter things that I did.
All right. So, and then Matt comes along. The Grant the third here comes along in 1978. Grant the fourth. Sorry. There's too many Grants. I'm getting them all confused. Grant the first was Grant Killian, and then Pop Grant, and then you, Dad, and then Matt is Grant the fourth. Too many Grants. Maybe.
maybe we added another one.
I don't know, Dad. I guess just a little bit maybe about, that period of time for everybody. I mean, that when Matt arrived, all four Grants were still living, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have pictures of four Grants together.
And I guess the other part of that story is your great grandpa lived first on the big farm where they didn't own, and then on the small farm that they did. But then eventually they moved again, right?
Yes. They moved off of the farm to my Aunt Sarah Gushart's house, which was like 3 doors down from where we live right now, where we're podcasting from.
Right. And this is another interesting family connection. So your Aunt Sarah, Pop Grant's sister, who was married to Bobby Gushart, who worked at the mine like we talked about, they lived right here in Quentin, but we are in the house that Mom grew up in.
Correct. Yes.
And so both sides of our family, for Matt and Mark and I, have this connection essentially to this one very small spot. And then even on top of that, there's a house immediately across the street from your Aunt Sarah's house, where your grandparents moved into and lived, that was the parsonage for the church in town.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar, a parsonage is a house, a home that the church owns that the pastor lives in, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that house was built in large part by
Wilmer. Mostly he was the one in charge of organizing and doing it all. But all of my uncles at one point or another, I believe, worked on it. Interesting with family now. My father helped my wife's father wallpaper the thing when they build it. So
right. So our other grandpa, Matt, Mark, and I's other grandpa, Pop Bud, wallpapered it.
Yeah.
And now our sister owns it.
Correct.
So, it's just like this little town, Quentin, Pennsylvania, is just like really kind of this, for us, especially the center of our family's universe. And these houses, like the house we're in right now, I think was built in the 1860s.
Yes, it was a Sears Roebuck house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so was Sarah and Bobby's.
Right.
Sears
It was
Roebuck
very
house.
similar. They were the same floor plan, weren't
Yes,
they? Like
they were.
These three houses right here.
Yeah.
3 of the 4 houses in a row here were all the same.
All with different additions that were put on after it.
And they were doubles.
Yes, they were doubles with a common stairwell.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, your great-grandparents end up living in Quentin. Your folks are living in the city of Lebanon.
Right.
And then you and Mom lived a few places, but you eventually moved here to Quentin as well.
Correct.
And then were you living here in Quentin when Grant number 4 was born?
Yes.
Yeah. So you had already moved here.
We were living in the small house. Karen's dad owned a bunch of properties.
Right. One of Pop
I'll
Bud's
say-
other houses.
Yeah.
You lived there for the whole time when all 4 of us were born.
We lived there until Mark was born. Not long after that, we moved on to the house in Zinsmill Road.
I mean, Matt comes along. Matt ends up being the biggest fisherman of all of us.
Well, Matt comes along. We have a picture of Matt in a really cute little green suit with a cane pole fishing for sunfish at Middle Creek, fishing the night before you were born because you were slow. You didn't want to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And you had an appointment. So the Friday night, we had a picture of him fishing the day before you were born.
Right. And you were like 30 months old when I was born. We're 2.5 years apart.
2 years, 2 months, and 2 days.
Is that right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes, he fished from the start. Well, I do know this, fishing, staying on the fishing thing, we would go fishing and he would fish as hard as you could fish, and you'd come along and throw in and catch the big one. That
For
was,
a while, maybe.
For a while.
That is no longer
No,
Yeah, that's no longer, but for a while that happened.
Matt is the most frustrating person to fish with. I mean, I've been fishing next to Matt my whole life, I feel like, and most of my experiences don't feel like that. Most of my experiences feel like me doing something and him telling me what to do and him catching fish after fish and me standing there watching him doing exactly the same thing that he's doing.
That was the more
and not catching, a quarter of the fish that he is.
The most frustrating part about it is that it wasn't even like, I mean, he'd kick your butt, but eventually he'd be like, all right, well, next hole, here's what you're going to do. Here's the bait. Here's the drift. Here's the cast. Good job. You hit it right where I told you to do. Nothing. He'd throw in 3 seconds behind you and catch a fish.
Right.
He'd help you and still beat you.
Right.
Like,
yeah, he's annoying. He's annoying to fish with.
You know the old saying, there's only 2 rules in fishing. 1, never give out all the information.
Right.
What's 2, lie?
That's all.
That's
it. Never give out all the information.
Well, anyway, so, man, I think there were a couple Pop Grant stories you wanted to tell.
Well, we could tell Pop Grant stories all day.
Oh, for sure.
But one of my most memorable ones was the family all went, but for some reason, me and you, Mike, and Pop Grant went to Indian River,
which is an inlet on the Atlantic Ocean in Delaware.
Yep. And we went, so we were going saltwater fishing from shore, but we went down at least a day, if not 2 days ahead of time, in his green camper van.
Right. He had like I think we talked about it once. He had like a green, was it a Chevy?
No, it was a Ford.
A Ford
van with a pop-up roof.
With a pop-up roof.
Yeah.
But we also took, a lot of things happened on this trip. We also took the tent with. Dad had this big blue, let's call it a wall tent, kind of.
But I remember when we set it up, we always said the circus is coming to town.
That's right.
It looked like a circus tent.
It was blue.
Like two-tone blue.
So there was a lot of stuff that happened. This trip was very memorable for me. So the first thing is we get down there, and you and I want to go fishing. We're like, he couldn't get the van stopped fast enough for us once we get there. And we're camping. This is like, actual camping. I don't even know if there was electric hookup then.
I doubt it.
So anyway, he wouldn't let us leave to go fishing until we set up this tent. But he wouldn't help us set the tent. Do you remember this?
No.
So we set this blue. It's a pretty sizable tent. And we were not that
heavy
old.
canvas.
Yeah, we were not that old. So we set up this tent, and the whole time he's just standing back watching. Didn't say a word. We get the tent set up. Well, we thought we had the tent set up, and we leave to go fishing. So when we came back that night, for supper, he got out a can of oyster stew that he got out of this camper van that I think very well could have been in it since the day the van was made, since from new. I mean, he poured it out of that can, and all I remember it looking like was gray slime.
It was not food.
So Mike and I did not eat that day.
Right.
We went back to fishing.
If you see either one of us, you can't imagine that we miss a lot of meals.
No. So anyhow, I remember arguing with him, and that was like, well, you're either eating this or you're not eating. And we're like, well, we're going fishing. We're not eating. And we went back to fishing, and I don't remember eating that night.
I don't either.
But I also remember that first night because Mom and Dad did come down on that trip.
Yeah.
But it was later.
Right.
I remember him saying to us, I remember we slept in the tent, but he wouldn't. He slept in the camper van. And at the time when I was thinking this through as a kid, I'm like, well, I don't understand why he's not going to sleep in here. There's so much more room. I mean, that van was not roomy.
No.
it wasn't really very fun to sleep in. But anyhow, in the middle of the night, the tent collapsed. And when the tent collapsed in the middle of the night, I thought, I know now exactly why he didn't sleep in here with us. He knew that we didn't set that tent up right.
Well, our most
I
valuable
can't believe
lessons.
you don't remember that trip.
I remember the trip really well. I just don't remember the tent part.
Yeah. Also on that trip, he gave me his pocket knife or something, and I went to stab it into the picnic table, and it snapped shut, and I cut my pinky really bad.
I do remember that. He always had a Barlow pocket knife.
And he was not taking me anywhere
No.
to get fixed. It was like, here's a Band-Aid, go away.
Yeah, and again, right, if you listen to the TMI episode, I tell a story about getting mildly injured on that trip and the amount of sympathy I got from him for that. So he definitely, he taught you grit, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I think all of that happened in from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until the next day when mom and dad
Probably 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
That was like all in a 12-hour window.
Right. But it's also like I look back now on that and I think, man, he took, how old were we, 10 and 12 or something?
Maybe younger. I don't know.
But he took us. You know what I mean? Like he would do that. And we fished with him all the time. And unfortunately, Mark, you were younger and didn't get as much of that.
I can remember the summer he died. I would just not knowing we didn't know he was really sick until it went quick. Once we learned he was really sick.
Yeah.
We thought he had diabetes. It turned out it was cancer. But I can remember that summer just coming to the age where I was into actually fishing, just sitting by the phone waiting for him to get off work, calling, no answer. Wait 5 minutes, call again, no answer. Wait 5 more minutes, call again. He'd answer, Poppy, will you take me out to the supply dams? And it was always a yes. There was never, never a no, I got to go do this. It was never a, this is more important to me, or it was always a yes, always. And then we'd be at the supply dams till dark.
And when we've talked about him a little bit, but he was an extraordinarily intelligent guy, and he was extraordinarily well read, and he read the newspaper every day. And by the time you're talking about, he was retired, although he still worked a lot of mornings during the week. But he took an afternoon nap. He would take the newspaper, right, in the summertime. He'd take the newspaper and he'd go outside. He had a rocking chair outside, and he'd sit in the rocking chair and work on the crossword puzzle in the newspaper and fall asleep. So when you're saying you're trying to call him in the afternoon, he was probably out there taking his nap in his chair outside. And of course, this was the day of corded telephones that were in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
And he couldn't hear real well. So.
Yeah, you're right. There's another Ruhl trait that a lot of us have inherited. Were there any other ones, Matt?
Well, there's a lot of river stories. The last time that I remember specifically going to the river with him, do you remember the time he fell? Were you there that time?
I don't think so.
It was you, me, and Kate.
Oh,
Kate was with us.
Kate was with us. We were on our way out to go fishing, right?
We were going fishing.
Yeah. That must have been, you must have, Bolen, you were young.
I was young. He fell right under the tower.
Yeah. And he hit his head, and his glasses went flying. And he was bleeding from above his eye, bad. And I was looking at him, I said, Poppy, are you okay? Because we called him Poppy also.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, where are my glasses? And I said, I don't care about your glasses. Are you okay? Where are my glasses? That's all he was worried about. He didn't care about the blood. He might have had a concussion for all I know. And so we found his glasses and they weren't broken. And we went fishing. We didn't go. He didn't go.
We tried to convince
him to go back and go home, and he would not leave.
And that's that.
And he had to be, I was probably the summer.
Yeah.
Probably 72.
71, 72.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Dad.
I just want not interesting, but he died of pancreatic cancer. But after my mother had died, we used to take a yearly trip about the same time up to Nobles Grove. And we would go to Nobles Grove, and we got there, and that's really when I was finding out about it. But we got to Nobles Grove, and of course, Matt and Mike, and I don't remember if you did it or Mark, they took off fishing because they fished right in the middle of Nobles Grove.
Nobles Grove was an amusement park that had a big creek that ran through the middle of it. So we didn't really care to ride the rides. We would fish all
It was
day.
full of trout.
Yeah, and you can hear about it today too. If you look it up, it's rated one of the highest parks in the country. You don't have to pay to get into it. You have to pay individually to use things. However, what I was going with Pop Grant, we got there and everybody took off. The kids took off to go fishing, but he hung back and he had pancreatic cancer, and they kind of had misdiagnosed him at first. And he was saying to me, I itch all over. I don't know what to do. I itch so bad. And it wasn't much more than a month after that he actually died of pancreatic cancer. So
yeah, it was losing him was a great sorrow to all of us. Yeah. It was a hard thing. And, I talked a little bit in the bird hunting podcast about how much I loved upland bird hunt. It's one of the things I'm really into, and I really lament, missing that opportunity with him. We grouse hunted a little bit with him, but it's not really kind of the same thing. And
well, it is for me.
Grouse hunting is?
I shot my first grouse with Poppy.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean that.
We were side by side.
Yeah.
And this grouse flushed in Little Moors down at the gate. And I shot one shot and the grouse went down, and he walked over to me and said, "You'll never get that lucky again."
And it probably was a long time before you did.
A long time.
I have this memory of him at being on a friend's farm. We used to spend time when we were in high school. We shot a lot of starlings and pigeons, which were agricultural pests around barns. And we were at a friend's farm, and he was there that day. He had probably taken me, he had probably driven me over, and he was watching us shoot. And we didn't really mention he was a great wing shooter, but what did he have in his right eye, his dominant eye?
He had something called, I think it was histoplasmosis. It was something that they thought maybe when he was a kid that walking around in chicken crap, that he got some kind of thing that he got in, and eventually it affected the retina of his eye, where when he would look directly at something, the thing he was looking directly at was fuzzy, wasn't in focus real right, but all around it was okay.
Right, so he couldn't see it. It was right-handed shooter, and this was in his right eye. It was in his dominant. So he had peripheral vision, but he didn't have very good vision in the center of his eye. So anyway, the guy is, half blind in his right eye, and he's watching us shoot at these starlings and miss them. And he finally walks down to me and he says, "I don't know what you're doing wrong." And I said, "If you're so good at this, show me." He took the shotgun from me. He folded the first starling that flew by at like 40 yards. And then he handed the gun back to me. And I was like, "Do it again." And he's like, "No, absolutely not." And that was another thing. He would say, "Quit while you're ahead."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's, again, another life lesson from Pop Grant.
You only got lucky.
Right. I mean, to this day, I don't know if, that was an absolute wing shooting skill thing, because he probably had not shot a shotgun at that point in years. Took the gun from me, killed the first bird that he shot at, and it wasn't like some super easy shot. And then he handed the gun back to me. He knew when to stop. But yeah, and then, like you're saying, I guess my last story about him was that summer that he ended up getting sick. I mean, I know exactly when it was, because I was born in 1980, so I turned 16 in 1996, end of May. And I got my learner's permit right away. And he took it upon himself to do a lot of outdoor maintenance caretaking at our church and at the cemetery. And he drove a 81 or an 83?
I think it's an 83.
A 1983 Chevy Custom Deluxe 2-wheel drive pickup.
The White Knight.
They called the White Knight. It was white colored pickup with a topper on it. And I got my learner's permit from the DMV, and he was at church working on something, and Mom, who had taken me to get my permit, it must have been a Saturday, took me over there to help Pop Grant do whatever he was doing. And there's kind of a little wood lot at our church, where we would haul sticks and yard waste kind of debris too. And that's what he was doing, something like that. And he had stuff in the back of his truck that he wanted to throw like onto a burn pile. And he had the truck parked there, and I walked back and found him. We were doing whatever. And then he said, I got to back the truck up here. And he said, you got your permit, now you do it. And he gave me the keys. Well, you didn't need keys to start that truck. It had an ignition that you didn't need keys for. Anyway, so I didn't know. And it was a 3 on the tree.
Yeah.
It was a manual 3-speed on the column. And I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never driven anything before, Anyway, so I jumped in it. And he showed me how to get in reverse, and I got it into reverse. And then he got out, and there was a big rock back there next to the pile. And he's standing there telling me to back up. Come on back, come on back, come on back. And bam! I nailed the rock with the bumper of the truck. And it bent the bumper under. It was like, oh, stop, what are you doing? And then I got out, and I said, what happened? He said, you hit the rock. I said, you were telling me to back up. He said, you can never trust anybody. He
was teaching you a lesson.
He was teaching me a lesson.
We pulled that bumper.
Yeah, no, we just took.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. We just took a chain and went over to the old basketball hoop pole and
tied it to it and pulled the bumper.
Pulled the bumper straight. He didn't care. He was an auto mechanic. The car didn't mean anything to him. The lesson was the more important thing.
What do you say? Go let stops or go let cracks?
Yeah,
back up till it crunches. You used to always say.
But then, and I know that was the summer he got sick then because a few months later he got sick, and my learner's permit, it kind of threw the whole family into disarray, obviously, and he passed away in September, and that permit expired, and then I didn't get my driver's license until sometime the next year because I had to go back and go through the whole thing again.
Just back on you guys, I'd come home from work and where are the boys? Oh, Pop Grant took them there fishing. What? Here I am. I want to go fishing. Where did they go?
Oh, we'd fish 4 to 5 days a week in the summer with Pop Grant.
But he would almost always make us go help him with something first.
Yeah. We'd always have to go to the church or the cemetery and do some sort of outdoor maintenance before we were allowed to go fishing. So he might pick you up at 8 o'clock in the morning, but it was early afternoon till you were going fishing.
Raspberry season, you did not. You picked raspberries until lunchtime.
He picked them. There's black raspberries that grow wild a lot of places here, and they're really good.
What about you guys go up in the Poconos and pick blueberries or whatever?
Yeah, he got mad. He got mad at us.
How mad he got at us?
Yeah. That was around Ricketts Glen State Park, I think.
Yeah.
Mike and I are picking blueberries.
Because he'd send you off. I mean, you were like on your own.
We had a bear one time on the other side of the bush from us. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
But anyway, we're picking blueberries, and all of a sudden, I'm like, I think one of us says to the other one, can you hear water? And we're like, yeah. So we sort of ventured towards this sound, got down there. Well, there's this little lake with a spillway. So as we're running past Pop Grant, full out running, we got the fishing tackle out of the truck. He was just, what was he saying? He was yelling at us. Mad. No, you can't go fishing until the buckets are full, I think he was yelling.
He always had fishing rods. He had a topper on the back of that truck, and he had a fishing rod rack in the top of the topper. He always had fishing rods in it. There was always fishing gear in that truck.
He lost us that day.
Yeah, we ended up. That was the first time we ever caught pickerel.
Yeah, that was pickerel fishing. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't think he took us back there after that.
No, I don't remember going back. He always said, because he grew up with all the brothers, he always said, he had a saying that was 1 boy is a boy, 2 boys is half a boy, and 3 boys is no boy at all when it came to work. Which meant if you had more than one of us, we would get distracted at least half the time. Probably more than
I think that's pretty accurate.
If he was here, he would probably say that he didn't get all that much work out of us in the days.
I had 3 boys. I can associate with that.
There you go. Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't know. And then I don't know if you got anything to add about the final Grant, Matt. He's in his 20s now. Grant
actually just turned 24.
Oh yeah,
last week. So he, I don't know. I mean, he does do some outdoor things. He hunted a little bit and kind of didn't take to that, but he does fish a fair amount.
He does a lot of trout fishing.
Yeah, and he got a kayak, and he takes my boat some, and he goes out, and he bass fishes some, too.
He skis.
Yeah, he skis.
Yep.
That I cannot do.
Yeah, he's a good skier.
Yeah.
Well, any more stories for this one? It's plenty long.
Well, as we are talking, I've thought of a half a dozen different things that I can say, but I could keep going. But I think we'll end unless something else comes up.
No, I mean, I think this is it's such a deep family history, the Grants and Pop Grant especially, and you, Dad, everything you've given us from an outdoors tradition standpoint. It's such an important part of our story. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pop Grant.
Yeah. Thanks, Pop Grant. We miss you all the time. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening, everybody. As always, you can find most of our content on outdoorrules.com. That's RUHLS, like our last name. We're on Instagram at Outdoor Rules. We're also on Facebook. If you really want to do us a favor, leave us a comment on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. It helps other people find us. Looking forward to telling a lot more family stories like this. We'll have episodes coming up. We kind of have a blooper reel sort of episode to talk about that I'm excited about soon. But all right, I love you guys.
Me too. Love you too.
Hunting and fishing, the great outdoors, mixing history, laughter, love, and folklore, creating memories with family and friends. These are the trophies that matter in the end. Outdoor Rules.